Hello and welcome to Chaos Dwarf Radio, the Brazen broadcast, brought to you with the same frequency as Games Workshop Old World updates. I am, as always, Oxymandias, and with me I have Chitzkoi.
Hi.
MichaelX.
Howdy.
And Spirit Walking, we have Reaver.
Hey guys.
Boys, it has been far too long since we have done one of these, and audience, I must apologise for the unintentional break in our parasocial relationship with you. Life has been very, very real for a few of us on the podcast, and we took a little bit of a break in recording things, but we are back and we are trialling a slightly new format, something a little bit looser, something a little bit more shorter, and we're going to see how we get on with this. First things first, though, how about we have a little chat about hobby? What have we been up to lately? Chits, why don't you kick us off, mate?
Sure, I got started with bolt action, and Jack and I got into bolt action. And
oh yeah,
I spent hundreds and hundreds of pounds on bolt action. I still haven't played bolt action yet. And right now I'm surrounded by the very last plastic Soviets that I'm assembling. But I'm having a baby in about a day, so I am probably going to be calling this the last hobby I do for at least a little while.
Yeah, most likely, mate. You come to a conclusion on the basing conundrum for those Soviets?
I think the thing is they don't just have summer and winter uniform Soviets. They've also got like springtime/autumn outfits. So no is the short answer, and I'm just going to freestyle it.
All right, nice one. And yeah, bolt action has been absolutely class game to get into. Michael, what have we been working on, mate?
Well, I think I took a page out of your book, and I've been sort of butterflying this year. Or, well, you know, everybody knows about the Skaven Palooza, so I'll spare you those details. Yeah, this year's a lot of Tomb Kings, and recently, like today, like 30 minutes ago, I started painting my Tyranids because of you.
Very good. Yeah.
So, yeah, that.
Are they for Kill Team, Michael?
They are.
Nice one. What's the Tyrannid Kill Team look like in terms of what models does that bring to the table?
They're your basic infantry. I think they're Termagants, Hormagants, Warriors.
Very cool.
That's the names I can remember.
I think you could take a Lictor too.
Nice.
Yeah, very true.
And did I see in that picture, Mike, that you're using second ed models, like the proper old school ones?
Yes, I am.
Nice. El Clasico. Very good. All right, nice one. Reaver, what have we been up to, mate?
I don't remember how to paint anymore, so I pretty much just push green stuff around. I've been assembling a ton of stuff. Got essentially a whole ogre's army's worth of just ogre infantry, so that's fun. It's really not that many, but a little Kickstarter ended up ballooning with some freebies, and yeah, so I was assembling those for a while. Some Battleforge Hobgoblins, and then other than that, I've got a care package in the mail from Chits with some Caradron boats that went me off down that tangent, you know. Yeah, that's pretty much my whole room's a mess, and it's mostly just piles of gubbins everywhere. So I'll figure it out at some point. But yeah, it's all right. Michael didn't help either, so it's everybody's fault. And now I'm just gonna end up painting Tyranids anyway, so everybody's just posting pictures of those, so I'm screwed.
Oh yeah, mate. You've had Tyranids for some time as well, haven't you? I bet you've still got some Tyranids in the old bits box, though.
Yeah, I mean at this point, like I don't have a whole lot of need to buy any, but they're so much fun to just create something out of my bits box. But in all likelihood, if I do that, it'll just be BFG, to be honest.
Yeah, very cool. And you know, to carry on with the theme of our conversation, you know, what of us being Tyranids online, I'm currently painting some Tyranids. I saw coming up on eBay a box set of Tyranids new on sprue. The box is about 22 years old. It was the exact battle force that I got bought on, I think it was my 11th birthday, and it's the first Warhammer models I ever got. My original ones long gone, traded, broken, sold, etc. But it's been a big nostalgia trip for me. I've been repainting them in the same colour scheme as my 11-year-old self did. hopefully with a little bit more skill than I used to. And just to keep it 1990s, I've gone complete Goblin Green bases on all of them as well. And that's a project I'm doing now. So these are actually 3rd edition models, but they will be used for 2nd edition 40k, because that's the 40k my gaming group mostly plays. And before that, until recently, as Chitz was just talking about, been playing quite a bit of bolt action. Been painting up a German army for bolt action. Been really enjoying that. And the other big thing going on is Necromunda campaign with some local boys, which is always a good laugh.
And that's proper Necromunda from 2nd edition, not weird, creepy new Necromunda with like rules.
Oh yeah. No, this is real Necromunda. This isn't Nucromunda. This isn't Age of Helmar. This is proper Necromunda.
I don't know why I find that so funny. I think it's because the casual disregard it shows Age of Sigmar, to be honest.
Look. Age of Sigmar has its place, but I'm not sure if
right now its place seems to be on the Discord.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, classic Necromunda for me as well is I know how to play 2nd edition 40k, and I know how to play Necromunda. It's essentially the same rule set, so there's some more subtle differences with Necromunda where it's a smaller scale game, but I don't have to hold a load of rules in my head. I mean, it's like mates have been talking to me. I always talking about Tyranids here, and Tyranids obviously been announced this new 40k box that's coming out. And a few of my mates have said to me, "Oh yeah, 40k 10th. You interested? The new rules?" Nah, couldn't be less interested, mate. Couldn't be less interested. The models, great. Looks like a Screamer Killer's coming out, but I've got the rule sets I like now. I don't need to learn anything new.
I like that you think that it's complicated to learn something that's not the 2nd edition combat resolution rules, which are the most complicated version of combat res that any Warhammer game has ever had.
Yeah, mate, and in 2nd ed it's mental, isn't it? Because for those of you who are too young or never played it, old 40k used to use a system of combat dice where essentially 2 warriors fought each other. You would roll a dice, you'd add your weapon skill, and then there'd be some different bonuses around charging and other things and that, and you could do parries, make each other reroll.
I'm just going to cut you off there. We did say the new version of the podcast are going to be shorter. So I'm not sure we've got 2.5 hours in a lecture series to learn 2nd edition combat res.
Essentially, though, what I was going to say is in Necromunda, when you got one bloke fighting one bloke, it works so smooth. But having played in 40k some pretty big combats, it does get complicated quickly.
Well, we had a great time when we played our 4-way squat bash.
Oh man, that was awesome, wasn't it?
So I'm totally sold on 2nd edition. You'll never get me playing 40k with a black logo. And as far as I'm concerned, there is no silver logo 40k. That's not a real thing.
That's it. It's all bright Technicolor 2nd ed. So boys, we are going to be chatting a little bit today about something quite interesting that happened to us. Chitz was approached in an alleyway by a man in a big coat, dark glasses, and a hat, and he said, "Hey kid, you want to talk about Total War?" Chitz, do you want to talk about your interaction and what it resulted in?
For sure. Although I think maybe what's quite exciting is that this is an interaction that began before any of us really knew about it.
Absolutely.
So what happened was we started making content, and many of you guys will have seen the shows that we did with Sotec, both a year ago, and also the more recent one when the DLC was announced, and you would have seen that we started interacting with Indie Pride and all that kind of stuff. And all we know is that Creative Assembly approached the Brazen broadcast lads one by one day. A Creative Assembly fella who will remain nameless joined the Chaos Dwarfs Discord in the big influx of about 100 people who've joined since we started making those videos and since the DLC came out. And he sent us PMs saying that they would like us to come and meet with the senior team behind the Chaos Dwarfs DLC, sit down with them, talk to them, hear about what they've been up to, and share our views on what they've created. And We all signed lovely non-disclosure agreements, which this podcast is compliant with, because that's also one of the reasons why we're posting it when we have, which is after the DLC is out and after everything is kind of commercially happened for Creative Assembly the way they want it to. And we jumped on a video call with them at their instruction, and we had a very, very long and detailed conversation with them about pretty much every aspect of the DLC that they've created. And along the way, we learned so many things, too many things. I'm not going to list them all out here, but this is our chance to let you guys in on our perspective on the DLC, given that we've kind of seen it and kicked the tires on it and heard all about the visuals and talked to the designers behind it, and just to kind of share our views. I think that's the chat we wanted to have tonight.
Yeah, perfect.
And I think maybe the most exciting thing of all came right at the very end, actually, of the conversation, when we asked them how it was that they came to approach us specifically. And we had a bit of an inkling because of the way in which they'd messaged the group of the four of us. But they were very open with us and said that we're aware of your community. We set out to design the Chaos Dwarfs. We had to research a huge amount about the Chaos Dwarfs, and one of the first things we discovered when we got into it was that Chaos Dwarfs Online was alive and thriving. And since then, members of their team have been on the community, browsing the community, looking at stuff, listening to podcasts, and searching the wiki, and all sorts of kind of really cool things that we never knew about, which I think is a testament to everyone's kind of zeal in keeping the flame alive on CDO, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think something we're going to keep coming back to as we talk a little bit about the content from Creative Assembly that we've seen, well, by the time we're talking about this, the general public will have seen as well, is that it's, for Chaos Dwarfs, real fan-pleasing stuff. And it's quite heartwarming that they spent time on our fan site seeing what made our users tick, seeing what our users thought was the most important elements of Chaos Dwarfs, what they love about Chaos Dwarfs, and then just seeing that reflected. It's lovely to know that indirectly CDO has been a part of that creative process for them, a resource for them to do some of their research through, you know?
Yeah, they were super clear with us that everything they've made was canon, and that they based everything they did on verifiable canon sources. We can talk a little bit in a minute about what those canon sources were, because they shared them with us. But I think it was their efforts to kind of read the room and think, okay, if people are going to be Chaos Dwarf fans, what do Chaos Dwarf fans right now say about what makes the faction cool? And they just soaked it up in the way that a busy, bustling forum that's been around since 2007 only can. And I mean, there's so many different places we could start. I think they started the conversation by talking about their biggest design choices. And I think it's fair to say that everyone will have seen the DLC now. But I mean, Michael, in looking at the aesthetic that they went with, what did you think, just as a Chaos Dwarf fan?
I mean, the first thing we all saw was the first trailer that dropped, and I think I noticed the same thing everybody noticed, that they very skillfully incorporated 6th edition stuff with Legion of Asgore stuff.
Mm.
And it didn't look out of place. I mean, that's they did the best thing possible and made it look like it was something that could be on the table right now without looking weird or funny. But they did still maintain, you know, the somewhat comical 6th edition sense, if you know what I mean. Like it's still somewhat wacky, but it fits in with everything, I guess, grim dark these days. You know, the more darker Legion of Asgore aesthetic. I think that's the first thing that really popped up. Like, just really happy they chose the models they chose, without, you know, compromising too much.
No, definitely. And I think one of the conversations we had actually with the designers that day, wasn't it, was around wackiness versus grim darkness. You know, people will say, well, the old Hammer stuff was wacky, the kind of new Hammer stuff's grim dark. But actually, when Warhammer's done right, it's a little bit of both. It has always been a bit of a tongue-in-cheek setting. It's always been a larger than life, a bit of a silly setting, but it's also always been very grim and very scary. And yeah, I'd agree with that, Michael. They executed it beautifully with the Chaos Dwarfs. That they have that kind of looking like they're coming out of the old White Dwarf Presents book, but still having that kind of mean sort of edge to them. It's very good.
Jared, what did you reckon?
Yeah, so I think I'm a extremely biased source, as their DLC team has explicitly set out to meet my needs from Warhammer 2. So, they've gone from Tomb Kings to Pirate Undead to, this lovely Chaos Dwarfs release. So, I really don't have anything but praise for what they've done. And I think, Michael covered it aesthetically. It's spiritually, I think, what the community wanted. Certainly what I would like to see. One of those moments of, I think there's a sigh of relief that came out, right, when, we see that, it's what we would want. And I think that was their goal, and I think they really met that. And I think that it's going to be reflected, and we'll probably talk to some of that in the gameplay as well, and not just, in the aesthetics.
I think there was no bigger symbol of the aesthetic triumph that they had achieved than that picture of Astrogoth, which I think they've used in a number of promotional places, but he's in front of a big Kadai destroyer. And you can see he's got the back banners, and the back banners are the exact images that were given to you on the boxes of the 90s Big Hat range to cut out and keep and use as back banner art. And they didn't do a darker and edgier version of it. They said, let's take that 90s back of the box art in its 90s form. Let's take the size of Astrogoth's hat in its 90s form and stick those guys in charge of the 8th edition Infernal Guard range. And it's just a perfect combination, isn't it? I mean, they talked to us a lot about the philosophy they came with it, and you knew that they got it when they described the Chaos Dwarfs as an empire of smoke, blood, and ash, right? And they didn't shy away from the slavery. They didn't shy away from the giant lava idols. They totally understood the spirit of the faction, and I think they worked across everything to kind of factor that in. But I think one of the coolest things they talked to us about was all the different material that they'd actually referred to in building it in, and it was more than you might expect, even for us, wasn't it, lads?
Yeah, absolutely. It was. It wasn't just the 2 army books that they spoke about, but they did obviously draw very heavily on those. But no, there was also the old Monstrous Arcanum book, wasn't there? There was a stuff from Storm of Magic they were speaking about. Even going to what was it? Was it Sickfed, the old Ravening Hordes book?
Yeah, and I thought that one was really interesting because I know Flagellant notwithstanding, right? That Ravening Hordes list is like the biggest blue ball in the community because it implied that we were going to get an army book in 6th. And obviously, those people who know about the Tuomas story know that's almost what happened. But they talked about taking magic items out of Ravening Hordes, which I didn't even know that there were magic items in Ravening Hordes, to be honest. And they just took it, grabbed it, put it in, and even at one point they were showing up their physical copies of Tamakan and the army book, and just thinking that they reached into all of those sources simultaneously, it tells you that they didn't take it off in their own direction, which was almost one of the bigger risks that you have. They just drained canon for absolutely everything it had, and that is going to absolutely seep through every little bit and detail of what playing the game is going to be like.
I think it's kind of a double-edged sword where, we don't have a lot of official stuff. So the downside is, well, we don't have a lot of official stuff. The upside is, well, they don't have a lot to choose from, so we get everything. Well, nearly everything.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that was always the fear, right? Was that we were going to get stuck with Tamakan only, and we were going to lose this huge part of the faction's heritage. But as it stands, face facts, right? 2.8 million people, or however many people have viewed that trailer, have not looked at Chaos Dwarfs Online. most hobby fans don't know what this is. They might have heard about big hats, but the idea of taking big hats seriously is basically gone. I think they've easily given us another 10, 20 years of Chaos Dwarf fandom, in my opinion, right? They've just, overnight, they've brought the whole thing back because I think it has really struck a chord with people because it's so totally sincere.
And this is something I remember talking about on that night as well, Chits, was that we've had some people join the forum who are younger than us, and just doing a bit of maths with their age makes you realise that they were little babies or whatever when Tamarkan came out, and then for a lot of people, for an awful lot of people, this release here is going to be their starting point with Chaos Dwarfs. This is going to be them coming into the hobby or coming into the Warhammer worlds and meeting Chaos Dwarfs for the first time. So it was something that they had to nail, and it's so good that they did. That they went to all the different source books, they pieced it all together. I mean, and this is the stuff that as CDO we've been doing since day dot. We love official canon and CDO because there's such a small amount of it that we gather it, we latch on it, we draw it together, we join the dots, we try to find this bigger picture. And it's a very similar mission to what Creative Assembly have done there. And it's made it, I think you used the word sincere. It's very, very sincere. It's very faithful to what Chaos Dwarf should be.
So, I mean, we're going to go into a little bit more detail to talk about some of the really niche visual choices that they've made in the physical design a bit later. Before we do that, though, I feel, first of all, indebted to video game fans who are listening to this. Just know that since Reaver and I are the people who play the game primarily, and we've played a lot of Total Wars over the years, we've got our own separate mini cast that some of you guys will want to listen to where we talk about the game itself. But I did think it was probably worth stopping off at this point, Jack, especially as someone who I think has played so much Chaos Dwarfs 8th edition and Warhammer Fantasy in general, including against Michael and I. Some of the stuff they said about the combat style and the lore of magic and the way it compares to the tabletop experience really surprised me, actually.
Yeah, no, it was a real pleasant surprise because I think we've kind of hinted at this already, that one of the biggest fears, collective fears as a community we probably had, was that this was just going to be Tamarkan. And Tamarkan was never a full army book. We have to remember that it was a magnifying glass on a specific faction of Chaos Dwarfs, a specific time and place, who operated in a specific way. It wasn't like a full Chaos Dwarf army. It's comparable perhaps to say like the old Slayer list for regular dwarfs, right? It was its own thing. But where that was the most recent and official set of rules we've had, and I've dabbled in Warhammer Fantasy events in this past year or so, and I can tell you that list is restrictive. The list is good and it is strong, but it can only do one or two things really, really well, and you have to do those one or two things. What it really lacks is the full roster that gives you the full options. So it's nice that they've been able to take the stuff from White Dwarf Presents, from Ravening Hordes, and then add that on top of the Tamarkan stuff to make what I think is the list that I wish we had on tabletop, actually. The list that I think would make a much better tabletop experience if you're using official rules. But some of the really nice things that I saw brought through from the rule books onto the video game, I thought was around the lore of Hashut being properly represented. Like if someone's going to use Hellhammer or someone's going to use Ashstorm, and if they've played Tamarkan, they will have a very good idea of what that's going to do in the video game. It operates in a very, very similar way. The same spells kind of transferred over, which I thought was a really nice touch.
Michael, you play a lot of 8th with Tamarkan as well, right? Like proper 8th, not like fan 8th like I play.
Yeah, I play official 8th edition Tamarkan.
And in terms of the way in which that army operates, right? Because I haven't played with it. Because I run quite slave-heavy lists because I've got greenskins and that's some of the only fantasy battle miniatures I've got painted. And so I run these lists that have got loads of greenskins and hardly any Chaos Dwarfs in them. And I'll be able to do that in the game. I didn't know whether looking at the roster and everything they put through, whether you feel like playing the game, because I know you're going to be playing it for the first time, is going to feel anything like being on the tabletop did.
Well, I have played Total War Warhammer 1. Not like extensively, but I've played a few campaigns in it. So I'm not completely new to Warhammer Total War. But to answer your question, I think it's very different and yet not at all, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of well, how do you say it? It's a bit more fast paced in my opinion. Like, Warhammer is slow, 8th edition especially. So between turns you usually have like 15 minutes at least to think about your tactics. Unless you pause the game and stuff like that, which I'm not really patient enough to do. You don't really have that. That's different. So it feels like you have to be more quick on your feet, if you know what I mean. But other than that, it's pretty spot on in my opinion. There's so many things that are comparable and really well implemented. I think I'm going to enjoy this game more now that I have a faction that I really love and a computer that can run the game, which is also like a plus. Yeah, I think it's going to be fun.
Michael, you mentioned a word there when you were talking about playing tabletop games that I've not come across before. Could you explain what tactics are?
Firing the 1 in 3 rocket directly into the ground in front of my troops and still managing to win the game.
Cool. So I do know it then.
Firing your blunderbusses for 3 straight games and just getting absolutely nothing done with them, despite the fact you're rolling 36 dice per regiment. 2 regiment.
And still using that same unit in the next 4 battles.
Yeah, man, he just doesn't stop. It's because he gets to have 36 dice in his hands, and that's like quite a nice. It's like ASMR hearing them click.
I used to play 40k orcs in my teens. Maybe it's some of that, or maybe it's a little bit of Stillmania. I've written the list. I'm sticking to it.
So, and I mean, just to close off that talking point, Jared, like, I know that you've obviously played both a lot, right? Like, you've been through all of the Total Wars, but something Michael said reminded me of the situation you and I have both been in with Total War 3, which is kind of waiting for the Darklands to get filled in. Like, there's going to be something special about booting up that first Chaos Dwarfs Legendary Lord, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, purposefully, I think it's been a waiting game for me. I mean, as you said, like both of us have booted it up, but the real moment when the game's going to start for me is when I can load into Immortal Empires with Zatan and just start conquering things. I think it's going to be much more the experience that I look for in the game, not just from like aesthetics or anything, but the type of gameplay that I think will keep me in a campaign. Pressing end turn degenerately is certainly going to be the Chaos Dwarf roster doing that to me.
Well, and I mean, on that, right, you're very clearly going to go straight for Zatan. People can tune into the minicast to hear how you and I get on with our initial Legendary Lord choices, because I think that I've zeroed in on Astrogoth probably. But is there anything we wanted to talk about with the Lord choices? Now, put aside the fact that there's 3, that doesn't really mean anything to non-Total War fans anyway, but I'd say between those 3 and getting a Hobgoblin hero who's got legendary abilities and is pretty unique, I'd say we pretty much got the hits, didn't we? Like, I don't think there's a huge missing gap in that Lord list.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think everybody fully expected that Brazwath, or however you want to pronounce it. I'll do it differently every time.
That is the thing that's going to reverberate through the community, is that there are now canon pronunciations for words.
Yeah,
I hate that. I'll tell you that right now. I fucking hate it. I don't even care if they are saying it the same way that I said it. Beforehand, I had the freedom to pronounce it however I wanted, and now someone's telling me what the right answer is. I can't stand that.
I think I've learned a whole lot about like pronunciations that I didn't think were up for debate, but apparently they are. It's one of those situations. But anyway, so I think we all got what we wanted with Drazoth and Astrogoth but to me, Zatan was the one that struck me in the trailer, and then this is first bit of content we really were able to digest, other than that little bit of tease in one of the other trailers, and just like the cinematic they added of him in the trailer was, it probably honestly was hook, line, and sinker for me at that point. They did a really great job rendering him. I think that they did some aesthetic nods to the older colorizations with the blue. And yeah, I think he's going to spiritually feel very much like you would want Chaos Dwarf Despot to be in the campaign. So I think that's going to be really fun.
The color choices are perfect, aren't they? Like even like the flame designs on his pauldrons and the flame designs on his hat and stuff, and like the blue kind of quilted armor that he's got on. Like that is a 1990s Warhammer model heavy metal style, isn't it? That is proper like color popping. And actually, blue is a color that I've noticed popping up on the forum a little bit more over the last couple of years. It's a lovely color for Chaos Dwarfs. I think it's really cool seeing that.
I mean, I guess that kind of brings us to one of the first things to point out, which is they straightened the beards. But I don't think anyone really wants to talk about that as much as I do, because we can all tell why that is, and it's a bit awkward. But maybe worth dwelling on a little bit more instead is Gordas, right? This is a guy who much arguably like Zatan, he never had an official miniature, but what they did was they took one of the champions from the classic range and bam, that miniature is now a legendary character, canonized forever, and he'll have a voice and a personality and a load of special abilities, and that's what you get. And I think that's interesting choice. I think the other thing that's worth noting is that Gordas is all you get for Hobgoblins other than chaff units, right? There aren't Hobgoblin heroes or champions. There's no kind of individual hero that is a Hobgoblin. And I think that is an important choice, because that is just a trade-off that they made. And in a way, it kind of keeps the flavor going, because it keeps the Hobgoblins as slaves. But obviously, I'm finding something to cope with in that, because obviously I wish we had 5 different types of heroes and 10 different legendary lords and all that kind of stuff that's totally unreasonable. I don't know if you guys have had a look at the Gordas image, but you might be aware it's caused quite a stir online because people think he's super scary looking. I think he looks pretty cool. What do you reckon?
He is pretty scary. He's got a very Jokerish sort of smile thing going on, but he's supposed to be a Hobgoblin Khan, not a teddy bear.
Yeah, it's a mouthful of razor sharp teeth. But I think the other thing that's pretty cool, and we might come on to this again in a minute, is you do have that very Eastern influenced armor. And actually, if you look, he's got tattoos that are quite kind of almost Yakuza inspired, and it brings a flavor to the Hobgoblins that I think we've always wanted, which is the flavor of the Far East, you know what I mean, which is not necessarily something that came through in the 90s unit roster, but it definitely the minis, I mean, but it definitely comes across in that design. Anyone else, any thoughts about Gordas?
I think he looks spot on.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm gonna repeat the same thing over and over again, but they just did a great job on bringing everything up to like 2023 specs, design wise. And I think this fits in really well with everything that's Games Workshop is doing right now. So yes, he's scary, but he's supposed to be scary.
Yeah. Get the hunchback as well, which is a nice touch. Some of the detractors of our crotch roped Hobgrot friends in Age of Sigmar spoke about how they were lacking in that kind of hunchbacky sort of thing. And I think it's also important that these aren't Hobgrots from Age of Sigmar, are they? They have made them Hobgoblins from Warhammer Fantasy. And you speak about some of the Eastern aesthetic, about armor, those sort of like armor plate sort of things he has, and those tattoos specifically are very Far Eastern looking. And we know, and we spoke about on the podcast before, that Games Workshop has made Eastern looking Hobgoblins in the past in a less than tasteful way. Is that my charitable way of saying bloody racist.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice to see that this has been done in a bit more of a sensible, respectful way, a way that looks cool, doesn't make me cringe.
Yeah, and I mean, we may as well skip forward a little bit just to point out that, like, we had the conversation, we asked the question very explicitly. If you look at the Hobgoblin Wolf Raiders, they are different physically to the Hobgoblin Infantry, and that is, by our understanding, an intentional aesthetic choice to demonstrate that Hobgoblin Wolf Raiders are kind of higher caste fellas who come maybe from the Khanate, maybe they're more mercenaries, or they, you know, don't live under strict slave conditions, whereas the infantry are definitely kind of poor bastards who were enslaved as part of the slave uprising. They don't have the same armor aesthetic. They don't have those Eastern influences. Hobgoblins do look a bit different than they did on the tabletop, and I'm not just talking about Ogla Khan's Wolf Boys, but it is worth noting that CA made the decision to make Ogla Khan's Wolf Boys the Regiment of Renown. Now that tells you two really important things straight away. Number one, I think there is absolutely no chance that they're going to make a Hobgoblin Khanate faction. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that you're just going to get that these regiments in the Chaos Dwarfs, and that's it. You're never going to get Khanate, because if they were, then Ogla Khan would have been one of the two characters they had to use. And the second thing I think it tells you is that they're not coming to Dogs of War. So if Dogs of War or Southern Realms ever gets made, it won't have Gazak Khan in it, probably. Although maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe we'll have to wait and see. All we know is that Ogla Khan's Wolf Boys are in there, and they don't look quite as unacceptable as they did when the minis were made.
Absolutely. They look good. They look good.
You made a point that I almost forgot. I forgot about the panic attack we all had when we were worried that because they used a lot of Age of Sigmar stuff for the individual Chaos Gods, we were quite worried that Creative Assembly were going to use the Age of Sigmar Hobgrots instead of Hobgoblins. And that they were going to get bolted onto the side of the Tamakan Chaos Dwarfs, and that was going to be it. But we haven't quite got the original 90s Hobgoblins either. I don't know if you guys remember what we saw when we were looking at that, or what's been in the release materials, but the Hobgoblins that they've designed look quite a lot like tall goblins, right?
They do. They look like hill goblins, but a bit larger, a bit beefier.
And the hats, they are tall, but they're pointier than they are floppy. They're not traditional Scythian hats in the way that the hats of the kind of 90s really were. I don't know if that affected you guys, if you had an opinion about that. For me personally, I have a view, but obviously I'm more interested in what you guys have to say.
I would say personally, I feel like visually they are a little bit too close to Night Goblins. If I was lead designer, you know, I would know, just be playing with those proportions a tiny bit. I think you spoke a minute ago about how the Wolf Boys are shown as being bigger and nastier and less slave-like, and I think the Wolf Boys to me look a lot more like what Hobgoblins look like in my head, you know?
Yeah, I'd have to say that's probably my view as well. But much respect to the guys who design the Hobgoblin art as it is, and I think we have yet to see them in game strictly. But I do think there's something about the unit card art and some of the concept art that very clearly kind of sets you in a position somewhere between a classic Hobgoblin and a modern normal Goblin. And we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out when the game is actually released. Any other thoughts on Hobgoblins, greenskins in general?
Orc slaves, specific models for those.
Yeah, that is classy. That is nice.
That is cool, isn't it? They've not just gone, right, you get a unit of orcs, which, you know, if you were using official tabletop miniatures back in the day, that's all you had, really, wasn't it? You know, you just had to put some orcs in the army. I know that obviously third-party people have made slave orcs and stuff since, but it's nice that they've given us an official view on what slave orcs look like, you know, with scars and bandages and, like, Chaos Dwarf runes branded on their skin and stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's chains. It's chains and whips, and anyone who can take a look at the visual for the orc labourer and say that they're being politically correct about the word slave is absolutely looking at the wrong piece of paper, mate. What they did was make an intentional design choice to send a message that the reason that the greenskins are used at all is because the Chaos Dwarfs don't see them as people, they see them as labour, and if they stop labouring, then they stop being useful, and that's why they've got burned up arms and feet and they're covered in as many bandages as they are chains, because they are not having a good time. And if you look at that and think it's woke to use the word labourer when, you know, they are very clearly enslaved, get your head checked, dickhead. Why don't we move on and talk about the big beast in the room, as it were, the Kadai Destroyer. And what I enjoyed was they actually literally used the word centerpiece when they were explaining it to us, which
I didn't pick up on that.
It's true though. They called it, I wrote it down specially, they called it a heavily armored centerpiece unit, and I thought, Games Workshop's been here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's a unique piece. I mean, lads, have at it. Like, everyone's seen the trailer, we've heard its voice, right? It's a huge visual departure from anything else that's ever been made. Converting your own Kadai Destroyer is a huge rite of passage for every Chaos Dwarfs Online fan. There is no canon image until this moment, and now there is canon. What do you guys think?
I mean, I can't really argue with it. It's a big kind of chaotic, steampunky, fiery monster. I mean, it's great. It's really good. It's probably lent more towards the mechanical than I thought it would have done, because the only reference I really had for Kadai Destroyers were the Kadai Fireborn, I guess, which, you know, have armor and stuff, but they're really kind of like fire spirits, aren't they? Whereas this thing, you can see there's a fire spirit inside of it, but it's very much, you know, powering a large machine, which, you know, is an aesthetic we've seen before, you know, in our other interpretations of Kadai Destroyers as well.
Very 40k, isn't it?
Yeah, do you know what it is actually? It wouldn't look out of place in a 40k Chaos Space Marine army, would it? They have some similar sort of units to that.
Sotec made the same point on our live with him.
But I think what Michael said earlier about how an awful lot of this is almost like if it was made today. You know, you're taking those older ideas and thinking, if Games Workshop released that today, what would it look like? Yeah, there you go.
Bellas, what do you reckon?
I mean, I think that's for me the biggest take. You know, like, I have 2 kids. I don't really play video games a lot anymore. So this game has been the most exciting video game thing for me in years. And that's not even the best part, in my opinion, about this. The thing that I'm most grateful for towards Creative Assembly and to some extent maybe Games Workshop is the fact that, and we've touched this before in the conversation, the fact that Games Workshop kind of, you know, let us hang in a few times, and then now there's all this new but not really new, you know, new old stuff. And you guys mentioned this before, is bringing in new folks to the game, to the Warhammer world, to the game Chaos Dwarfs world. I know this is going to be influencing our competitions, our blocks. I mean, we've already seen that the game hasn't even been released, and we've already seen new blocks pop up and people joining, sharing stuff. You know, talking about starting up new armies. I hope they have rich parents.
Or very good connections, Michael, and an ability very good connections to the community and the ability to use the direct message function on Discord.
Or that. But I mean, to me, this is just all like bullseye. You know, this is going to be great for the community and having official canon stuff. I mean, this is never going to stop any of us from creating wacky, weird, as canon like contraptions. But it is nice to have like an official direction that vibes with everything that's out there. You know, they haven't put anything in the game that I wouldn't want to see, you know, be made into an actual model. For example, and I hope Games Workshop is listening, in the old world. And I think that's maybe the best bit for me. You know, there's some potential for the future, I hope. Being very optimistic here. Games Workshop, please be listening.
Andy,
We did very well to get Creative Assembly to find out about our podcast and our community. Games Workshop, we might be hoping for a little while longer. But you say Andy Hoare.
Listen. Members of the
we know we had a piece of paper land on his desk.
Yeah.
That's our reach, right?
Yeah.
We got a couple of thousand signatures. A piece of paper landed on his desk. He might have blown his nose at it. But it was there.
Well, we got emails from Games Workshop. It was just from the copyright claims department. So
yes,
proceeding with care. One thing. I mean, before we dive into my big question about this one, Jared, looking at the new Kadai, what do you think? How do you feel?
A good question. I have interesting relationships with the things that lived in the monstrous arcanums of the world that never had explicit models, and I've always found those to be the most fun aspects when I go about collecting an army.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it, which is me hoarding my own little realm of my own intellectual property that nobody else cares about. But
cease and desist.
Yeah, but it doesn't stop me from going out and making my thing that looks like a crab instead. So I think aesthetically it rings with Asgore, and I think they hit the nail on the head with it in terms of giving us something that's going to have a lot of weight and a lot of impact in the game. So I think that it's going to be really fun to work with in that sense. So and it'll give people, like Michael said, lots of new people joining the forum where that's the only thing that's ever existed in their mind. So hopefully we'll see some people out there making that a reality before we even get a model for the old world. Cough cough.
Or Age of Sigmar, which could very well be an influence here. So my big question for all three of you is, if this model came out tomorrow, £90. Well, let me just fire up gamesworkshop.com for a minute. Let's look at what a modern centerpiece goes for. What do we reckon we should measure it next to? Nagash?
Nagash is about £90, is he?
What do you reckon? Nagash is £85.
Go Nagash, because I find Age of Sigmar sometimes has a slightly lower price point than 40k.
What about big bone centerpiece? What's his name? Catacross.
Oh, King of the Nose Nibblers.
Catacross was £70, right? Let's go with that, because we're not a mainstream faction. Let's face it, right? He's not a god. Kadai Destroyer comes out tomorrow. It's a plastic centerpiece kit from Games Workshop. It looks like that. It's £70. You gonna buy it?
Me personally, no.
Is it like the old world rules or Age of Sigmar?
Let's say it's got rules in Age of Sigmar, but let's say it comes out in the Age of Sigmar release, but it's got rules in the old world as the Kadai Destroyer.
Yes.
Really?
Listen, man, this is where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, for me, I just find I don't know what model I'd expect to get for £70. I think I would always, just with my own sort of internal valuing sort of thing going on, I think I'd always struggle to spend £70 on a single model, even if that model was the size of a dinner table. A bit more of a quantity than quality man when it comes to my miniature collections, as you well know. Look, Hero Quest minis, Battle Masters minis, and 50p Hogwarts, and I'm your man.
Reaver, where are you at?
I don't need anything else that will stop me from finishing the one that's half baked in a box with a pile of bits. So it's a pass for me until I at least finish the one that I already have brain babied into existence that needs a lot of love.
Yeah, I would clap a new Chaos Dwarfs Online member posting their version of this mini. I would clap them until my hands were sore. Do you know what I mean? I'd absolutely vote for them in a golden hat. Absolutely, 100%. I think I probably wouldn't buy it. And the reason for that is because for me, it's a little bit too 40k. And the Fireborn are much more kind of dangerous looking. The Fireborn, the unstable stuff, all of that kind of stuff is its own thing. I'm going to really love running around with my Kadai Destroyers when I play the campaign of Total War. 100%. Going to really love it. Fantastic unit for Total War. For the tabletop, and because I don't know if you guys have seen, but people have been trying to make STLs of this thing since the trailer dropped, basically. And we're going to start seeing these on the blog. on the forum on blogs, and I just think it's a really interesting question for if this is the Age of Sigmar aesthetic that Games Workshop goes for, then actually maybe I would buy it. I actually don't know. I'm gonna put myself as a don't know.
I'm gonna vote that you will buy it.
Yeah, you. I mean, you know me.
You'll buy it.
Let's be honest. You don't really always make the most sensible decisions when buying minis.
That's fair. That's why I'm downgrading myself from a no to a maybe, which will become a yes as soon as some poor local gaming store has to close down and does a sale, and I can get it for £69.99 instead of £70. I'll probably end up buying it. Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. But that's the Kidai Destroyer, a design triumph by the digital team and a beautiful thing, and also really something with its roots in the Forge World design, but really its own personal design. A beautiful cinematic moment for Astrogoth in the trailer that will live forever in the fandom. Congratulations, great assembly. Let's talk about the Lamassu, the other big thing that got a redesign.
Yeah, let's.
This is tied to the beard thing, in my opinion, right? The Lamassu's been redesigned for a number of different reasons. I saw a lot of very positive reactions to the Lamassu, including from like conservative designers like Eddie. And to be clear, Creative Assembly designers who are listening to this podcast, Eddie literally bought a Lamassu head, like a classic ugly Lamassu head, off me, right? To make a Minotaur conversion. And he liked the redesign that you've done of the Lamassu. So that's how much of a hit it is with the community. It is a big design set of decisions that they've made. It is one of the things that looks more different than anything else on the tabletop. Again, gents, have at it. What do you think?
Yeah, do you know, it's really interesting, actually, you talking about the beard thing, because it's something I hadn't even picked up on, mate. I hadn't even picked up on it with the dwarfs. I'd obviously missed that part of the conversation. I hadn't picked up on the beard thing at all. I can kind of guess why they've maybe
we didn't talk to CA about
direction.
that because I'm the only person who cares about it, and I know why they did what they did, and it's obvious.
Yeah, no, I'm reading between the beard curls. I can work it out, but I don't think it subtracts from the design of the Chaos Dwarfs or subtracts from the Lamassu here. Still got a slightly twisty beard. The beard is still braided. It still has all those trinkets and stuff on it. I'd say the biggest difference design-wise is around more the top of the head. It's kind of lost the big funky haircut that it once had.
It's the size of the head as much as anything, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit more as if you can say realistic for something like a Lamassu, but it's a bit more realistically proportioned, as in if this was a real animal, that's how big its head would be. I mean, if you think about the actual old metal Lamassu, and I've got it, that's a gorgeous model. I know it's as ugly as sin, but I love it. That thing would never physically be able to take flight. I'm not even sure if it'd be able to stand up.
Magic, mate, magic.
That's it. It's magic, isn't it? Whereas this one, its side profile matches actual Lamassu statues, from like Iraq and stuff, a little bit better, I would say. And it is a bit more normally proportioned. It's lost the big funky hair, and it's got armor plating instead. I don't see any issue with it, really. The fact that they've coloured it blue, I think that's a throwback to Monstrous Arcanum, because it wasn't blue in canon art before. It was like a red colour or a black colour normally, whereas I seem to remember there was an old illustration of it with blue skin or fur, maybe, I'm not sure, in that book there. I have no issue with the design at all. I like it.
Yeah,
I've always thought that like the Lamassu especially is something that I would give anybody a lot of visual freedom on as being a magic creature. So I think I wasn't coming in with it with like I wanted to look like the sixth ed, right? And there's been so many different takes in the community on it, whether it be an old school model that has the kind of big goofy head, or if we're talking more more realistically proportioned. There's just been so many different ones that I don't think I was out there looking for something particularly specific. So, I think what they came across was a pretty big success in my mind, at least. And I think in general, anybody who's coming at me with, what they think a Lamassu looks like, I'm like, yeah, that's fine. That looks like it could be. We've had so many different interesting takes. I'd call was it Deadlead?
Edisu.
The Edisu, yeah, the Deadlead one. We've had so many different. It's like one of those things that's like I want it to be creative and different every time I see it. So
I'd forgotten about the Edisu. Someone want to explain that for all of the new members of the community?
Well, there's not that much to explain. At some point, Eddie was learning how to do digital sculpting, and he started by sculpting his own head, and then like stuff came together with Lamasu and
Before you know
Eddie's
it,
head.
he was immortalized forever in digital
Absolutely. Eddie's a bearded guy with a healthy head of hair, decent sort of quiff going on. It was always going to happen, wasn't it?
I mean, if you ever want to make the joke, like, if Lamasu and Eddie had a baby, that's it. I mean, perfect.
Look, we know Eddie is a furry, so let's not even start that conversation.
Well, I mean, Mikey, what do you think? How do you feel? Lamasu?
Well, I mean, with everything canon/official, I have relatively low expectations. So I kind of align myself with what Jared said, that I didn't expect much/anything, and what they did was beautiful in my opinion. It's different than what we've seen, I guess, but I think they did a great job in making something, as I've said like 4 times already, modern with a twist, or old school with a twist, I suppose.
Yeah,
I like it. And if you're gonna ask the question, if a model would be released of this thing, would you buy it? Likely.
Yeah, I mean,
this one I'd be much more likely to buy than the big robot.
I think we probably, in the Age of Sigmar range, I think we're probably going to get something called a Lamasu and something called a Bull Taurus or a Bale Taurus or whatever. And I think the big question is where the Age of Sigmar range lands on the kind of Caradron to Fire Slayer like nexus of 40k to like Naked Dwarfs in Lava. And I think because they've already got Naked Dwarfs in Lava, I don't know how much Lamasu wizardry we're going to get, but I'm sure we'll get something.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing is I was very, very much in the opinion of, well, obviously there's going to be massive crossover between Age of Sigmar and the Old World. And I know we've been doing this podcast over a year now, and I'm already back to staring into the crystal ball and talking about what the Old World's going to be. But I was pretty certain the crossover thing. Then the Hobgrot models come out, and I mean, God knows we all put it to the test. They scaled perfectly. Yeah. They all sat on 20mm bases. So I was like, well, this is it. This is obvious. This is what's happening. But then Creative Assembly brings out this, which we know they've done in conjunction with Games Workshop and with Games Workshop's permission and having all their designs ticked off by Games Workshop. And they look nothing like the Hobgrots. So that's really thrown for me any assumptions that I had about what the Old World may or may not be. Now, I'm not under any illusion that when the Old World game comes out, Chaos Dwarfs will be at the very, very, very bottom of that list. So we will probably end up, if you wanted to play with official models, using whatever Age of Sigmar ones they give you in that game, to be honest.
And just to be clear, before we move on, because obviously we will come back to this when we do our Horns of Hashut and Snarlfangs episode. Just to be clear to everyone, right? Because I've heard this argument in a few places before. If you think that Games Workshop are stupid for not prioritizing Chaos Dwarfs because of how well received this trailer and DLC will be, you don't understand how long it takes Games Workshop to design and make something. Because like this time last year, we were talking to Sotek about what was very obviously him hinting at the Snarlfangs release, and the Snarlfangs just got released like a month or 2 ago. And in that context, Games Workshop, even if they hear the message that like 3 million trailer views sends, they can't act on that and build a whole range of miniatures for like years. because they have to add it to the list of stuff that everything else is being worked on. So I hope that's what happens, but I think it's much more likely that we get something for Age of Sigmar that is cross-usable, and then we end up thinking about how we're going to cross-use it. It sounds like the Lamastew's a hit as well. Well done, Creative Assembly, we salute you.
Didn't they say it spoke as well, Chits?
They did. They said it spoke. They've said this in Discord subsequently as well. It speaks the language that they've worked on, that is Dark Khazalid, and it whispers insane stuff. And they had to do some serious arguing with the voice designers to get that through, but they got it through, and thank God they did, because they just totally get the Chaos Dwarfs. If you click on a Lamasu and it doesn't whisper something about you going insane, or that sends you a little bit insane, then it's not a real Lamasu, is it?
Yeah, no, you are right. It shows real understanding, because someone who didn't know this army properly would just go, there's a big monster, it roars. That's not what a Lamasu is. Yeah, very good.
I mean, there's lots of other things that people will be aware of, but those were the big hitters that we wanted to talk about, really. There's a whole storyline. There's a ton of concept art they showed us of Hashut statues and bull gods that I hope comes through in some way, that was really beautiful and really showed that they understood what this cult was and what this god is. There's a whole plot line about liquid magic that everyone's going to get to experience. All of that stuff everyone knows about. I guess my only question for the group, and I got no script for this bit, is there anything you guys wanted to point out that came out from the call, or anything that you want to leave people with that they can focus on as they load up the game and play it for themselves?
Well, we've talked about this bit before, in the getting catched up bit before we started recording. One thing I'm really grateful for, and we've all expressed that to the Creative Assembly team, and it's really important for me. We've touched about this, in this podcast as well. The fact that they actually visited our forum and actually looked at what drives us as a community, and they actually, basically listened, because that's kind of how it feels to me. They listen to what we want. It's really, it leaves me feeling very grateful, if that makes sense. And I really, really hope that the guys who worked on this and who spent months designing all this stuff and researching this stuff, I hope they really know how fulfilling this is, I guess. We put in, many of us put in a lot of work, not just in being a part of the community, but also keeping it running and doing the competitions and the Discord and stuff like that. And it's really fulfilling, I guess, to get some acknowledgement, some official DLC and likewise, having them acknowledge basically what kind of that they noticed what kind of positive community this is. I think that was really a touching part of the conversation we had with them.
No, definitely. This doesn't feel like something, because sometimes when new rules come out and new books come out for the table stuff and stuff, it can very much feel like a company is doing something to us. Whereas this really feels like something that's been done for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think hearing them say the words golden hat organically.
Yeah, the fact they were aware of our competitions and had watched the competitions.
Well,
fantastic.
Not only golden hat, but they mentioned specific competitions more than others. I mean, they've seen all the ass cannons.
And they still stayed.
Yeah.
I
think that's the beautiful thing. And I guess, after a year of hiatus, the thing that we just wanted to say as a Brazen crew is we stand on the shoulders of giants in doing this. when they talked about what they'd seen on CDO, they were talking about the wiki. They were talking about the archive, which Michael sweat blood to get transitioned into discourse. And they talked about the blogs and the image galleries and the creative writing that people do. And, you know, just being able to browse that to understand, okay, from the Games Workshop official lore, what is it that resonates? What is it that you really have to see that people love behind these very short paragraphs from the 4th edition army book? And none of that works if it's just the 4 of us banging on in a chat room. Do you know what I mean? It takes a whole Discord full of people, and every late night that you've ever done, finishing a golden hat entry, even though it's late, and all of the direct messages and likes that you give people when you compliment them on their hobby posts, and engaging with stuff in the off topic and keeping the on topic clean and following the community rules so that we don't get shut down and all of that kind of stuff. That all leads us to a position where finally, on the back of Zatan's armor, we have a canonical statement for what way round the Hashut rune goes.
Yes, absolutely.
And you've got to admit,
and when you consider, that comes from the forum.
If anyone settled that argument, if Creative Assembly took a single thing from us, they took the way round the Hashut rune goes, because they looked at the minis too. They had the same holy war that we did, and they chose wisely, in the words of that knight from the end of Indiana Jones. So just probably, I totally agree with that, Michael. Big shout out to the community, but then equally a big shout out to everyone on the show, except for me, who does so much to actually make the community work. Obviously, Reaver, you and I are going to talk about the game in a lot of detail on the minicast, but is there anything you wanted to just comment on or leave us with?
Yeah, I think the only thing is, at the time this goes up, there should be a contest running a new golden hat that, in celebration of the DLC coming out. So keep an eye out for that. Should be some good prizes and, some DLC keys there. So yeah, take a look at that. It'll be themed around the DLC release, and hopefully we'll draw in a lot of new people, because I think it's going to be an exciting time to be on the forum and to be a fan of Chaos Dwarfs. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing the game, and looking forward to seeing how it bolsters the hobby as we go forward.
Well, massive round of applause, Creative Assembly. We know you're listening to this, you little scamps. You probably don't want to think about Chaos Dwarfs ever again now that you finished this DLC. You're probably sick. You spent hours doing all of the relentless design and art, but like a massive salute to you, not just for this DLC, but also for finishing the task that you set out to complete by bringing every 8th edition race into the modern era, which with the release of the Chaos Dwarfs DLC, you finally succeeded. And some people would say you can now rest. Obviously, everyone looks jealously at the rest of the Immortal Empires map and starts thinking about what cool stuff you're going to design next. So yeah, massive round of applause for everything we've seen and looked at today. Anything else we want to leave folks with, gents?
No, I think that's absolutely perfect time to knock on the head. I think with Reaver saying, come to the forum, check out the new Golden Hat competition. That's what we want people to be doing, really, isn't it?
Excellent. Well, in that case, here endeth the first of the new series of the Brazen broadcast.
Yes, we're back, baby.